The summer heat pressed down on Los Angeles like a heavy blanket as construction crews arrived at Neverland Ranch in June 2024. 15 years had passed since Michael Jackson left this world, and his estate had finally approved renovations to transform parts of the property into a permanent memorial. What nobody expected was that beneath the carefully manicured gardens and forgotten pathways lay secrets that would shake the Jackson family to their core. Marcus Chen, a third-generation contractor, had won the bid to oversee the restoration project. His crew consisted of 20 skilled workers who treated the job with reverence, knowing they walked on ground once graced by the king of pop himself. The initial plan seemed straightforward enough: restore the main house, repair the train station, and create a museum space in the eastern wing. Everything changed on the third day when Marcus's team began excavating the rose garden near the main gate. The ground-penetrating radar had shown unusual readings in that section, but everyone assumed it was old plumbing or perhaps a forgotten septic system. When the excavator's bucket hit something solid at 8 feet down, the operator immediately stopped and called Marcus over. What they uncovered wasn't concrete or metal piping. It was white marble, pristine and deliberately placed, forming what appeared to be steps leading deeper into the earth. Marcus felt his hands trembling as he brushed away centuries of accumulated soil. This wasn't some utility access point. This was architecture, purposeful and elegant. He immediately contacted Katherine Jackson, Michael's mother, who at 94 years old still held significant influence over decisions regarding her son's legacy. Her voice cracked over the phone when Marcus described what they had found. She had lived at Neverland for years during Michael's lifetime, and never once had he mentioned anything buried beneath the rose garden. Within hours, the Jackson family descended upon Neverland Ranch like a storm. Paris, Prince, and Blanket Jackson arrived together, their faces masked of confusion and curiosity. Janet Jackson flew in from New York, canceling 2 concert dates. Even La Toya, who had distanced herself from family affairs in recent years, made the journey. They gathered around the excavation site as workers carefully removed more earth, revealing a structure that defied explanation. The marble steps descended into darkness, each one carved with intricate patterns that seemed to dance in the afternoon light. Along the edges, someone had etched symbols that none of them recognized at first glance. They weren't Egyptian hieroglyphics or any common architectural ornamentation. They were musical notes, carefully disguised within decorative flourishes. Only Paris, who had inherited her father's musical genius, noticed the pattern. When she hummed the sequence, tears streamed down her face. It was the opening melody to Childhood, one of her father's most personal and haunting songs. The family made a decision that night. Whatever lay below would remain their secret until they understood its purpose. They hired additional security, cleared the construction site of unnecessary personnel, and brought in a team of archaeologists sworn to confidentiality. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a renowned expert in modern architectural history, arrived the following morning with equipment designed to explore confined spaces without causing damage. As dawn broke on the 4th day, Dr. Mitchell descended the marble steps with a fiber-optic camera system. The family gathered around monitors, watching breathlessly as a camera revealed what lay beyond the entrance. The steps continued downward for 30 feet before opening into a chamber. The walls were lined with gold-flecked tiles that reflected the camera's light like 1,000 tiny stars. In the center of the room stood a structure draped in white silk, untouched by time or decay. Katherine Jackson collapsed into her daughter's arms, overcome with emotion. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the quiet hum of the camera equipment and the distant chirping of birds in the trees above. Whatever Michael had built beneath his beloved ranch, he had done so in absolute secrecy. Not even his mother, the woman he cherished above all others, had known about this hidden sanctuary. Prince Jackson finally broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to go down there. We need to see what he wanted to show us." His words hung in the air like a challenge and a prayer. Everyone knew he was right, but fear gripped them all. What if this discovery shattered the memory they had carefully preserved? What if Michael's secret revealed something that would change how the world remembered him? Dr. Mitchell assured them the structure was sound, the air quality acceptable, and the space safe to enter. She explained that based on preliminary scans, the chamber had been sealed sometime in the early 2000s, likely between 2003 and 2005, during the most turbulent period of Michael's life. The precision of the construction suggested he had employed master craftsmen and paid them well for their silence. As the sun climbed high in the sky, casting long shadows across Neverland Ranch, the Jackson family prepared to descend into the earth and confront whatever truth Michael had buried there. They stood at the threshold of revelation, knowing that once they crossed it, nothing would ever be the same. The King of Pop had left them one final performance, a secret show that had waited patiently in the darkness for 15 years, and now the curtain was finally rising. The air grew cooler with each step downward. Paris led the way, her hand trailing along the marble wall where her father's musical code had been etched. Behind her, Prince held a flashlight that cast dancing shadows across the gold-flecked tiles. Janet and La Toya followed, their footsteps echoing in confined space like a heartbeat. Catherine had wanted to descend as well, but at her age, the family insisted she wait above, watching everything through Dr. Mitchell's camera system. The 30 steps seemed to stretch into infinity. Each member of the family felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on them, mixing with grief that had never fully healed. Michael had been gone for 15 years, but in this moment, descending into his secret chamber, he felt closer than he had since the day they lost him. The walls seemed to pulse with his energy, his creativity, his desperate need to communicate something that words alone could never express. When they reached the bottom, Paris stopped so suddenly that Prince nearly collided with her. The chamber opened before them like a cathedral carved from dreams. The ceiling soared 20 feet overhead, painted midnight blue and studded with fiber optic lights arranged in constellations. Michael had recreated the night sky, but not as it appeared from any place on earth. These were the stars as seen from Neverland, captured on the night of June 25th, 2009, the night he died. The realization hit them all simultaneously. Michael had planned this. He had known, somehow, that his time was running short. This wasn't a tomb built in preparation for death. It was a message, carefully constructed to be found only after he was gone, only when enough time had passed that the world might finally be ready to understand. Dr. Mitchell's voice crackled through their earpieces, professional calm barely masking her astonishment. The preservation is remarkable. The humidity control system is still functioning. He built this to last centuries. Her word confirmed what they all sensed. Michael had invested serious resources into this project. This wasn't a whim or an eccentric millionaire's folly. This was important. The silk-draped structure dominated the center of the chamber. It stood roughly 12 feet tall and 8 feet wide, its shape suggesting something between a monument and a performance stage. Prince approached it first, his fingers reaching for the fabric. "Wait!" Janet called out, her voice sharp. "We should document everything first. We need to understand what we're looking at before we disturb anything." But Prince had already grasped the silk. It fell away at his touch, so light it seemed to float rather than drop. What it revealed stole the breath from every person in that chamber. It wasn't a tomb. It wasn't a coffin or memorial plaque, or any traditional marker of death. It was a mirror, floor to ceiling, framed in hand-carved that depicted scenes from Michael's life. The frame told his story in miniature, a young boy singing with his brothers, a moonwalking figure beneath a spotlight, children playing in the shadow of a carousel, hands reaching upward toward an unreachable sky. But the mirror itself was what transfixed them. It didn't reflect their images. Instead, the surface shimmered with moving pictures, like a screen but organic, alive. Paris stepped closer, and suddenly she was looking at herself as a toddler, sitting on her father's lap while he sang to her. The image had no sound, but she remembered that moment with perfect clarity. She had been sick with fever, and he had stayed up all night singing every song he knew until she fell asleep. Prince touched the mirror, and his childhood appeared. There he was at age 7, learning to dance while Michael demonstrated moves in the living room. The joy on both their faces was radiant, untainted by the tragedy that would come. La Toya gasped as her own memories surfaced in the glass. Family dinners at Havenhurst, recording sessions in the studio, arguments and reconciliations that had shaped their complicated relationships. Janet's reflection showed her brother's face, not her own. She saw Michael during their Scream video shoot, the two of them suspended in that futuristic set, working in perfect synchronization. She saw him in quiet moments she had forgotten, watching her perform with pride evident in his eyes. She saw him crying alone in the dressing room after bad news, vulnerable in ways he never showed the public. Dr. Mitchell's scientific mind struggled to process what a camera was capturing. This technology shouldn't exist, she whispered into her microphone. Memory-responsive surfaces are purely theoretical. The processing power required would be enormous, and the data storage alone would require systems we don't have even now in 2024. But Michael had done it anyway. Somehow, impossibly, he had created a mirror that didn't just reflect faces but pulled forth memories, emotions, and truths that lived in the hearts of those who stood before it. The technical specifications didn't matter. What mattered was a message becoming clear to everyone in that chamber. Around the base of the mirror, they discovered drawers built into the wooden frame. Paris opened the first one with shaking hands. Inside lay journals, hundreds of them, filled with Michael's distinctive handwriting. The entries dated back to his childhood with the Jackson 5 and continued right up until weeks before his death. These weren't the sanitized thoughts he had shared with biographers. These were raw confessions, fears, dreams, and observations about fame, family, creativity, and the price of living in the spotlight. The second drawer contained hard drives, meticulously labeled by year. Unreleased recordings, Prince read aloud. Song for Paris, song for Prince, songs for Blanket, song for Mother, songs for Janet, songs for the world after I'm gone. His voice broke on the last words. Michael had left them a musical legacy they never knew existed, compositions created in secret, save for this moment of discovery. The third drawer held videos. Not performances or music videos, but personal recordings. Michael speaking directly to the camera, explaining his choices, asking for forgiveness for his mistakes, expressing love in ways he had struggled to do in life. There were messages addressed to each family member, to his children, to his mother, even to siblings he had fought with over the years. Janet sank to the floor, overwhelmed. Why did he hide this? Why didn't he just tell us everything while he was alive? Her questions echoed off the walls, multiplying into a chorus of confusion and pain. La Toya knelt beside her sister, tears streaming down both their faces. Because he was afraid, La Toya said softly, afraid we wouldn't understand, afraid the world would mock him, afraid that speaking these truths would make him even more vulnerable than he already was. Paris stood before the mirror, watching as it cycled through countless memories. She saw her father's entire life playing out in that reflective surface, all the beauty and tragedy, the genius and the pain, the love and the loneliness. She understood now what he had tried to create here. This wasn't a tomb for his body. It was a vessel for his soul, a place where the real Michael Jackson could exist without the distortions of fame, media manipulation, or public misunderstanding. Prince joined his sister, and together they watched their father's memories dance across the impossible mirror. He wanted us to know him, Prince said. Really know him, not the version the world created or the version he felt forced to perform. He built this place so we could meet the man behind the myth. Above ground, Katherine Jackson watched the monitors with tears of understanding streaming down her weathered face. Her son, her complicated, brilliant, wounded son, had given them one final gift. He had given them truth. The Jackson family spent 3 days in that underground chamber, rationing their time between reading journals, listening to unreleased recordings, and watching the mirror as it revealed memory after memory. They established a rotation, ensuring someone was always present while others rested above ground, processing the overwhelming emotional weight of Michael's revelations. Dr. Mitchell's team worked around the clock to document everything, but even they found themselves drawn into the intimate drama unfolding 30 feet beneath Neverland's rose garden. Paris became the keeper of the journals. She sat cross-legged on the cool floor, her father's words flowing into her consciousness like a river that had finally broken through its dam. The earliest entry showed a boy desperately trying to please a demanding father while nurturing a creative spark that threatened to consume him. I dreamed in music last night. Young Michael had written in 1970. Not songs, but colors that sounded like emotions. I tried to explain it to Joseph, but he said dreaming doesn't win competitions. Maybe he's right. Maybe I should keep my dreams locked away where they can't disappoint anyone. The journals revealed a pattern that broke Paris's heart. Throughout his life, Michael had split himself into pieces. The performer the world demanded, the artist he wanted to be, the child who never got to grow up naturally, and the man who struggled to reconcile all these fractured identities. He wrote about the pressure of being labeled a genius before he understood what the word meant. He wrote about loving and hating the spotlight in equal measure. He wrote about trust, how fame had taught him that most people wanted something from him rather than wanting to know him. Prince focused on the recordings. His father had always been meticulous about music, but these tracks revealed an entirely different dimension of his artistry. One song, titled The Weight of Crowns, featured just Michael's voice and the piano, raw and vulnerable in ways it produced albums never allowed. The lyrics spoke about the isolation of success, about being worshipped but never truly seen, about the exhaustion of maintaining perfection when all he wanted was permission to be imperfect. Another recording made Prince stop breathing. It was a lullaby, clearly written for him, with his childhood nickname woven into the melody. Michael's voice sang about hopes for his son's future, prayers that Prince would find happiness in simplicity, that he would never feel the burden of impossible expectations. Sweet Prince, my little man, I hope you know how much you changed me. Before you were born, I thought love was performance. You taught me it could be quiet, unconditional, and real. Janet spent hours with the video messages. Michael had recorded them over several years, sometimes looking healthy and energetic, other times appearing exhausted and thin, the stress of scandals and trials visible in the shadows under his eyes. But his words remained consistent across all the recordings. He spoke about regrets, about choices he wished he could unmake, about people he had hurt through his own fear and insecurity. One video particularly devastated Janet. In it, Michael addressed a rift that had developed between them during his final years. Sister, my beautiful sister, I pushed you away because I was ashamed. Not of anything I did, but of what people assumed I did. I couldn't bear the thought that you might look at me and wonder if the accusations were true. I knew they weren't. And you knew they weren't, but the space between knowing and proving felt like an ocean I couldn't cross. I'm sorry I let my fear matter more than our bond. You deserved a brother who fought harder to maintain our connection. La Toya discovered something else. Hidden compartments within the mirror's frame, accessible only by pressing specific musical notes carved into the wood in the correct sequence. Inside these secret spaces, Michael had stored evidence. Documents proving his innocence in various scandals, communications showing how media manipulation had twisted narratives, financial records revealing how people he trusted had stolen from him. He had gathered proof but never used it, choosing instead to endure public persecution rather than drag more people through the ugliness of legal battles. He protected his accusers. La Toya said, her voice heavy with disbelief and anger. Even when he had evidence that could have cleared his name, he chose silence. Why? Why would he do that? Dr. Mitchell, who had been cataloging the documents, offered perspective, because exposing the truth would have required destroying people, including children who had been manipulated by adults. Michael believed protecting children, even those used against him, mattered more than protecting his reputation. The weight of Michael's sacrifice became clear. He had chosen to be misunderstood, to be mocked and accused and torn apart by public opinion, rather than cause additional harm. The cost had been devastating. His journals from the trial years made painful reading, filled with suicidal thoughts, desperate prayers, and a loneliness so profound it seemed to bleed through the pages. But interspersed with darkness were moments of transcendent beauty. Michael wrote about watching his children sleep, about the sound of rain on Neverland's roof, about a particular sunset that moved him to tears. He wrote about strangers who showed him kindness without wanting anything in return, about children in hospitals who forgot their pain while listening to his music, about the moment during a concert when he felt connected to every single person in the audience, all breathing and feeling as one organism. On the third day, Paris made a discovery that changed everything. Behind the largest journal, hidden in the deepest drawer, she found an envelope addressed simply, to whoever finds this place. Inside was a letter, dated June 20th, 2009, just 5 days before Michael's death. His handwriting was shaky, suggesting physical weakness or emotional distress, but the message was clear. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry for leaving so many questions unanswered during my life. Fear kept me silent. Fear of judgment. Fear of being misunderstood. Fear that my truth will be dismissed as delusion or manipulation. I built this chamber as a bridge between who I was and who the world thought I was. Everything here represents the real me. Imperfect, searching, wounded, but always reaching toward love and beauty despite the darkness. I don't expect this to change minds that are already made up. People believe what they want to believe. But for my children, my family, and maybe a few others who genuinely care, I wanted to leave something authentic. This is my testimony, unfiltered by publicists or lawyers or the distorting lens of fame. Judge me by what's here, by my own words and creations, not by the stories told about me. I've made terrible mistakes. I've hurt people I love through my own selfishness and insecurity. I've failed to live up to my own standards more times than I can count. But I tried. God knows I tried to be good, to do good, to use my gifts for something beyond ego or profit. I hope that counts for something. To my children, you are my greatest achievement. Not my music, not my performances, but the three of you. If I did nothing else right in my life, I loved you perfectly, completely, without condition. Never doubt that. Everything I build for you. To my mother, I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to fix everything. I'm sorry the world hurt your son, and you had to watch. Thank you for never stopping believing in me, even when I stopped believing in myself. You saved me countless times just by existing, by being the one person whose love never wavered. To everyone else, see me, not Michael Jackson the icon, but Michael, the boy who loved music and children and magical things, who wanted desperately to matter, to leave something beautiful behind. This chamber, these memories, this impossible mirror, they're my real monument. Everything else is just noise. Paris finished reading the letter aloud, her voice breaking on the final words. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet sound of crying. They had descended into the earth expecting to find a tomb, but what they found instead was an invitation to truly meet someone they thought they had already known. By the fourth day, word of the discovery had leaked despite the family's best efforts to maintain secrecy. News helicopters circled above Neverland Ranch, their cameras unable to penetrate the dense foliage, but their presence a constant reminder that the world waited, hungry for details. The Jackson family faced an impossible decision, what to reveal and what to protect. Michael had left this legacy for them, but did they have a right to keep it hidden from his millions of fans who had loved him, grieved him, and deserved to understand him better? The family gathered in the chamber for what they intended to be their final visit before sealing it and deciding its fate. They had spent days absorbing Michael's truths, and the emotional toll had left them all exhausted. Prince carried a list of questions he had compiled, mysteries even the journals and recordings hadn't fully answered. Paris brought flowers she had picked from Neverland's gardens, wanting to leave something living in this underground sanctuary. Janet held a letter she had written to her brother, unsure whether speaking to him through the mirror would somehow allow him to hear her. La Toya descended the stairs last, moving slowly, her eyes red from days of tears. In her hand she carried something she had kept secret from everyone, a small wooden box Michael had given her decades earlier. "Keep this safe," he had told her. "If something happens to me, if things go wrong, you'll know when to open it." She had honored his request for 15 years, but standing in his secret chamber, surrounded by his most intimate revelations, she finally understood that this was a moment he had anticipated. The mirror had been quiet when they arrived, its surface showing only their reflections instead of the cascade of memories it had displayed before. Dr. Mitchell had theorized that the technology, whatever impossible science powered it, might have a limited charge or could be responsive to specific emotional states. But as La Toya approached with her wooden box, the mirror suddenly blazed alive. The surface swirled with colors that formed shapes, and those shapes became a scene they all recognized, the chamber itself, but years earlier, during its construction. They watched as Michael supervised workers, his face hidden behind sunglasses and a surgical mask, pointing and gesturing as craftsmen installed the gold-flecked tiles. The image had no sound, but they could see him testing the mirror, touching its surface with wonder evident in his body language. Then the scene shifted. Michael was alone in the chamber, sitting on the floor exactly where his family now stood. He looked terrible, gaunt and exhausted, his famous features hollowed by stress. But he was writing, filling journal after journal with furious intensity. The family watched their brother and father in this private moment, seeing his desperation to communicate, to explain, to be understood before time ran out. La Toya opened the wooden box with trembling hands. Inside was a key, ornate and clearly custom-made, with a musical note-shaped bow. She had never known what it unlocked, but now it seemed obvious. She approached the mirror and noticed for the first time a small keyhole at its base, hidden in the carved wood. The key slid in perfectly, and when she turned it, something inside the chamber's walls began to hum. The sound grew gradually, not loud but pervasive, filling the space with a frequency they felt in their bones more than heard with their ears. The mirror's surface changed again, but this time instead of showing memories, it began displaying text. Words appeared as though typed by invisible hands, filling the reflective surface from top to bottom. Paris gasped as she recognized her father's distinctive way of phrasing things, his unique perspective on the world. "This is new content," Dr. Mitchell said, her scientific detachment finally cracking completely. "This isn't recorded memories or pre-programmed messages. The system is generating original text based on, I don't even know what parameters. This technology is beyond anything that exists in the public or private sector." But the family didn't care about the technology. They cared about the words forming on the mirror, Michael's final message delivered through means that defied rational explanation. The text read, "You found La Toya's key. Good. I knew you would all work together. Eventually. That was always my hope, that even in death I might help bring you closer. The key unlocks the deepest layer of this place, the truth I could barely admit to myself." The mirror's surface became transparent, revealing that it wasn't solid at all but rather a screen hiding a space beyond. Behind it lay another chamber, smaller than the first, circular and intimate. The walls were covered entirely in children's drawings, thousands of them carefully preserved behind glass. Some were crude crayon scribbles, others more sophisticated, but all were signed with names and dates. "These are from sick children I visited." The text on the mirror continued. "Every hospital visit, every charity event, I asked them to draw something that made them happy. I kept them all. When the world called me strange for loving children, for wanting to help them, I would come here and remember why it mattered. These drawings are pure joy, unfiltered hope. They remind me that innocence exists, that beauty survives even in the darkest circumstances." The family moved through the revealed doorway into the circular room. The impact of seeing thousands of children's drawings, each one a testament to a moment of connection, overwhelmed them. Prince found a drawing that showed a stick figure with a sequin glove moonwalking, signed Timmy, age 7, leukemia survivor thanks to MJ. Paris discovered artwork from a girl who had written, "You made me forget the pain. You are magic." In the center of the circular room stood a final structure, this one truly resembling a tomb, though not for human remains. It was a time capsule, glass enclosed and carefully sealed. Inside they could see objects that had meant something to Michael, a single sequin glove, the first one he had ever worn, a cassette tape labeled "Me and My Brothers," first recording session, 1968, a dried flower he had noted was from his mother's garden, a child's drawing of a simple house with a family in front, representing the normal life he had never experienced, and at the center, a handwritten note. Dr. Mitchell carefully photographed everything before Prince, with his siblings' approval, broke the seal. The process was delicate, requiring specialized tools to preserve the contents while accessing them. The note was written on simple paper, no different from what anyone might use, making its contents feel somehow more intimate and real. Michael's final written words were brief. "I was here. I felt. I loved. I created. I failed. I tried again. I was human. Beautifully and terribly human. If you remember nothing else, remember that I reach for light even when surrounded by darkness. That's all any of us can do. Reach. Always reach. And teach your children to reach too, toward love, toward truth, toward each other. That's my legacy, if I have one. Not the moonwalk or the music, but the reaching. Never stop reaching." Janet broke down completely, her composed facade finally shattering. She had spent years telling herself she had made peace with her brother's death, convinced herself she had understood him as well as anyone could. But these chambers revealed how much he had hidden, how much pain he had carried alone, how desperately he had wanted to connect but didn't know how. All the family members grappled with the same guilt. Why hadn't they pushed harder to understand him while he lived? Why had they accepted the walls he built instead of finding ways to break them down? But mixed with the guilt was profound gratitude. Michael had given them a gift that transcended death. He had found a way to speak his truth when the pressure of living no longer silenced him. The impossible technology of the chamber, the mirror that read memories, the carefully preserved evidence and artifacts, all of it was his way of saying, "Here's who I really was." Here's what I really meant. Here is the love I couldn't express while cameras were watching. As they prepared to leave the chambers, Paris touched the mirror one final time. It displayed one last image, Michael dancing alone in the studio, lost in music, his face transformed by pure joy. No audience, no pressure, no judgment. Just a man and his art, in perfect harmony for a brief, beautiful moment. The image froze, and words appeared below it. This is how I want you to remember me. Free. The family ascended the marble steps together, emerging into sunlight that seemed too bright after days in the chamber's gentle glow. Above them, news helicopters still circled. Beyond Neverland's gates, the world waited for answers. The impossible decision remained, what to share and what to keep sacred. 2 weeks after discovering Michael's secret chambers, the Jackson family gathered in a private conference room at the estate's main house. Legal advisors, public relations experts, and museum curators filled additional chairs, all waiting to hear what decision had been made. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Whatever the family announced would shape Michael Jackson's legacy for generations to come and potentially rewrite public understanding of one of history's most scrutinized figures. Katherine Jackson spoke first, her voice carrying the weight of 94 years and a lifetime of protecting her children from a world that often seemed determined to destroy them. My son built those chambers because he was afraid of being misunderstood. He spent his entire life being picked apart, analyzed, and judged by people who never really knew him. The question we face today is whether revealing his secret sanctuary honors his memory or simply give the world one more piece of him to dissect and debate. Paris had barely slept since leaving the underground chambers. She had spent nights reviewing everything they had discovered, trying to hear her father's voice in the journals, searching for guidance about what he would want. Dad was the most famous person on the planet, but he died feeling unknown. That's a tragedy beyond the tragedy of losing him. If we seal those chambers and keep everything secret, we protect him from further invasion, but we also condemn him to remain forever misunderstood. Prince offered a different perspective. The mirror showed us memories because it recognized us as family. It responded to our emotions, our connections to Dad. What if it works differently for strangers? What if people go down there looking for scandal and the technology shows them only what they expect to see rather than the truth? We could do more harm than good by making it public. The debate continued for hours. Some family members argued for complete transparency, believing Michael had built the chambers specifically to reveal truth after his death. Others insisted on privacy, convinced that the intimate details of his journals and recordings would be twisted by media and critics just as every aspect of his life had been. Still others proposed a middle path, share some elements while keeping the most personal revelations within the family. Dr. Mitchell presented her analysis of the chamber's technology. Her findings were simultaneously fascinating and frustrating. I've consulted with experts in artificial intelligence, holographic projection, memory storage, and neuroscience. None of them can explain how the mirror works. The system appears to access actual human memories rather than displaying recorded content. It's reading consciousness in real time and manifesting those memories visually. This technology shouldn't be possible, yet it exists. If we make it public, the focus will inevitably shift from Michael's message to the mystery of the technology itself. Janet raised a practical concern that had been bothering her since the discovery. If we open those chambers to the public, they become a crime target. The unreleased recordings alone are worth millions. The technology behind the mirror is priceless. We would need security beyond anything Neverland has ever had, and even then, we risk theft, vandalism, or people coming there for the wrong reasons. La Toya had remained quiet throughout most of the discussion, but finally she spoke. Michael gave me that key 15 years ago. He didn't give it to a lawyer or put it in a safety deposit box. He gave it to his sister because he trusted family to make the right choice. I think he knew we would struggle with this decision. He knew we would debate and argue and second-guess ourselves. But ultimately, he trusted us to protect what needed protecting and share what needed sharing. As the debate threatened to circle endlessly, Blanket Jackson, the youngest and least public of Michael's children, asked to speak. At 22, he had spent most of his life avoiding the spotlight his father's fame had cast upon him. His words carried particular weight precisely because he so rarely offered opinions on family matters. I was 7 when Dad died, Blanket began, his voice quiet but steady. I have memories of him, but I was too young to really know him as a person. Growing up, I've had to learn about my father from old videos, from what family members tell me, and from what the internet says, which is usually a disaster. Those chambers gave me something I never had before, access to who he actually was. His thoughts, his fears, his hopes. For the first time, I feel like I've met my dad. That's not something we have a right to keep only for ourselves. His words shifted something in the room. Paris nodded slowly, seeing her brother's point. The kids who drew those pictures in the circular room, the millions of fans who loved Dad's music and felt connected to him, the people who defended him when the world attacked him, they deserve to know the truth too. Not the tabloid version or the sanitized public relations version, but the real, complicated, beautiful truth. Catherine closed her eyes, and for a long moment, everyone thought she might be praying. When she opened them again, decision had replaced doubt. We will share it, but not immediately and not carelessly. We will do it Michael's way, through art, through beauty, through carefully considered presentation that honors his wishes while protecting his dignity. The plan took shape over the following weeks. The Jackson family would work with museum designers and digital artists to create an exhibition that would bring Michael's secret chambers to the world without literally opening Neverland to mass tourism. They would build a facility in Los Angeles, near where Michael had died, designed to recreate the emotional and spiritual journey of discovering the underground sanctuary. Selected journal entries would be published, along with scholarly analysis providing context for Michael's thoughts. The unreleased recordings would be released gradually, one album per year, with proceeds going to children's charities Michael had supported. The video messages would be edited carefully, removing content too personal for public consumption, but preserving his essential truths and apologies. Most controversially, they decided to attempt replicating the memory mirror using conventional technology, creating an interactive experience where visitors could explore Michael's life through curated content. Paris took on responsibility for overseeing the project. She worked with designers to ensure the exhibition space would capture the chamber's sense of intimacy and revelation without becoming a macabre tourist attraction. Every element was carefully considered. The lighting, the music playing in different rooms, the way information would be presented to guide visitors toward understanding rather than judgment. The announcement came exactly 1 year after the chamber's discovery. At a press conference watched by millions worldwide, Paris Jackson stood before cameras and revealed that her father had left behind a secret legacy buried beneath Neverland Ranch. She spoke carefully, balancing transparency with protection of the family's most intimate discoveries. My father was an artist who understood that sometimes truth requires time to be properly heard, Paris explained, her voice strong despite visible emotion. He created something extraordinary beneath the place he loved most, a sanctuary where he could be completely honest without fear of immediate judgment. For a year, our family has lived with the weight and the gift of his final testimony. Now we want to share it with the world, but in a way that honors his intentions and protects his dignity. The media reaction was immediate and explosive. Within hours, the announcement dominated every news cycle globally. Skeptics questioned whether the chambers really existed or if the family had manufactured an elaborate hoax to revive interest in Michael's catalog. Believers celebrated, convinced this would finally vindicate the king of pop against decades of accusations and mockery. Fans gathered outside Neverland's gates, some weeping, others simply standing in silent tribute to a man whose story apparently had not ended with his death. The exhibition, titled Michael, Reaching for Light, opened 18 months after the chamber's discovery. The building itself was a work of art, designed by a Japanese architect who specialized in creating spaces that evoked emotional responses. The exterior was covered in mirrors that reflected the Los Angeles sky, making the structure seem to disappear and reappear depending on the light. Inside, visitors entered through a recreation of the marble staircase that descended into darkness before opening into wonder. The first room displayed Michael's childhood journals alongside photographs of young Michael with the Jackson 5. Visitors read his early thoughts about music and fame in his own handwriting, seeing the formation of genius alongside the loss of innocence. The curators had been careful to let Michael's words speak without excessive interpretation, allowing each visitor to form their own understanding. Audio recordings of young Michael singing privately played softly in the background, his voice pure and unjaded. The second room addressed the controversy and pain directly. Selected video messages played on screens embedded in walls covered with the same gold-flecked tiles from the original chamber. Michael spoke about the accusations that had haunted him, the trials that had broken him, the loneliness of being worshipped but not believed. The family had debated extensively about including this content, but ultimately agreed that avoiding the painful topics would make the exhibition feel dishonest. Michael had wanted to be seen completely, and that meant not hiding from his darkest moments. But the room didn't wallow in tragedy. Alongside the difficult content, the curators displayed the evidence Michael had compiled but never used, documents that clearly showed manipulation and financial motivations behind many accusations. They presented it factually, without melodrama, letting visitors draw their own conclusions. Many left this room in tears, finally understanding the full weight of what Michael had endured. The third room celebrated Michael's artistry through the unreleased recordings. Visitors could put on headphones and listen to songs that had never been heard publicly, experiencing his creative process through demos, alternative versions, and experimental tracks that showcase his willingness to take risks. The room was designed like a recording studio, with equipment from various eras of Michael's career displayed alongside explanations of how his sound had evolved. Music producers and fellow artists contributed video testimonials about Michael's genius, his perfectionism, and his generous mentorship of younger musicians. The fourth room recreated the circular chamber filled with children's drawings. The family had wrestled with whether to display the actual artwork or create recreations, ultimately deciding to use high-resolution reproductions while keeping the originals safely stored. The emotional impact remained powerful. Visitors walked through a tunnel of joy and hope, seeing tangible evidence of Michael's positive influence on sick and struggling children. Commentary from now-grown adults who had met Michael as children played throughout the room, their stories of his kindness and genuine care providing counter-narrative to the suspicious claims that had dominated media coverage. The final room contained a memory mirror, or rather, the technological approximation of it. The family had decided to keep the original chamber sealed in secret, but they worked with programmers and designers to create an interactive experience that captured its essence. Visitors stood before a large screen that used facial recognition and data analysis to present curated content from Michael's life that resonated with each viewer's emotional state and personal history. It was not the impossible technology Michael had somehow created, but it was powerful enough to give people a sense of connection to the man behind the myth. In this final space, Michael's last written words were displayed prominently. I was here. I felt. I loved. I created. I failed. I tried again. I was human, beautifully and terribly human. Visitors left through a corridor lined with mirrors that reflected their own faces back at them, a deliberate design choice meant to inspire reflection about judgment, understanding, and complexity of human nature. The exhibition was an immediate cultural phenomenon. Within the first year, over 2 million people visited, making it one of the most successful biographical exhibitions in history. Critics who attended expecting to ridicule were often the ones most profoundly affected. Several journalists who had written harsh coverage of Michael during his life published retractions and apologies after experiencing the exhibition. The complete narrative, told in Michael's own words and supported by carefully preserved evidence, made denial of his humanity and innocence difficult even for skeptics. The released music topped charts globally, introducing Michael's artistry to new generations while giving longtime fans fresh material to treasure. The songs written for his children became particularly beloved, their intimate lyrics and stripped-down production revealing a side of Michael's musicianship that had been overshadowed by his elaborate productions. Revenue from the music and exhibition, running into hundreds of millions of dollars, funded children's hospitals, arts education programs, and initiatives supporting falsely accused individuals, causes Michael had cared about deeply. But the impact extended beyond commercial success or critical acclaim. The exhibition sparked broader conversations about media responsibility, the price of fame, and society's tendency to destroy what it claims to love. Universities incorporated Michael's story into courses about ethics, media literacy, and the psychology of celebrity culture. Mental health professionals used his journals to discuss the importance of emotional expression and the dangers of isolation. Children's advocates cited his charitable work as a model for celebrity philanthropy done with genuine care rather than publicity-seeking motivation. The Jackson family found unexpected healing through the project. Working together to honor Michael's legacy forced them to communicate compromise, and reconnect in ways they hadn't managed since his death. Paris, Prince, and Blanket grew closer through shared understanding of their father's complexity. Catherine found peace knowing her son's true character will be remembered alongside, and eventually overshadow, the distorted public perception that had caused him so much suffering. 5 years after the Chamber's discovery, on what would have been Michael's 71st birthday, the family held a private ceremony at Neverland Ranch. They descended the marble steps one final time, before permanently sealing the underground chambers. They had shared what they believed Michael wanted shared, protected what deserved protection, and created a legacy that honored truth over myth. The actual chambers would remain undisturbed, a sacred space where the real Michael Jackson could rest in peace, finally understood, finally seen, finally home. As they sealed the entrance with a marble plaque that read simply, "Here Michael reached for light and found it," Paris Jackson spoke to her father one last time. "We heard you, Dad. The whole world heard you. You don't have to hide anymore. You don't have to perform or explain or defend yourself. You can just be. You can finally just be." The sun set over Neverland Ranch, casting long shadows across the rose garden where the secret had been buried for so long. In Los Angeles, visitors continued flowing through the exhibition, each person leaving with a more complete understanding of a man who had been famous but unknown, worshipped but misunderstood, iconic but deeply, profoundly human. Michael Jackson's final performance was complete, and this time, the world was truly watching, truly listening, truly seeing the man behind the moonwalk, the voice behind the music, the human heart that had beaten beneath the sequined gloves. His secret tomb had contained no body, no bones, no physical remains. Instead, it held something more precious and more enduring, truth. And truth, once revealed, cannot be reburied. It echoes through time, changing hearts and minds, healing wounds, and redemption even across the barrier of death. Michael Jackson had left the world his music, his dance, his style, and his mystique. But in those secret chambers beneath Neverland, he had left something infinitely more valuable, himself, complete and unfiltered, reaching toward understanding from beyond the grave. The king of pop was dead, but the man named Michael Jackson had finally, truly, been born into the world's consciousness. And in that birth, he found the acceptance and comprehension that had eluded him during his tumultuous life. His final moonwalk was backward through time, rewriting the narrative, reclaiming his story, and ensuring that when history remembered him, it would remember not the caricature, but the truth. The secret tomb had been discovered, and its contents had indeed left even his family speechless. But more importantly, it had given them and the world the words they needed to finally speak about Michael Jackson with honesty, compassion, and understanding. The end.